My name is Fredrik Gerten, and I'm the filmmaker.
And I'm Leilani Farha, and I'm the advocate.
We were talking before, is this a summer special still, or is it not? And then we decided to take away the summer, even if it's not, still is summer, but to still call it, this is a special edition of Pushback Talks. Special is something really important to us because you, Leilani, you were the UN, you would travel the world with the title of special for years, 6 years.
That's right.
And for me, you're really special. And for most of the listeners of this podcast, they love you because you're special. I'm the kind of the irritating guy who is, talking about money and wine and stuff. But that's okay. I'm not always a pleaser, but you are. You're like so sweet.
I hope that I'm not so sweet. I hope some governments are a little bit afraid of me, think that maybe I'm going to hold them accountable to human rights, something like that, while being very nice the whole time.
Yeah, that's true. No, we shouldn't be too nice. And the reason the special edition today is because there are more countries on the planet than the United States. Sometimes it's hard to understand when you read the media. But it's actually more, and one of them's named Canada. That's where you live.
It is.
And another country is called Germany. Also interesting. And both these countries have a general election coming up just between Canada in the 20th of September, Germany the 26th of September. What are people talking about in these countries? There are two big themes. One is obvious. It's climate change, because Canada, you had this extreme heat wave. Germany had this flooding of cities, totally crazy. So of course, people talk and should talk about climate change. But the other big story is
housing, unaffordable housing.
We should just touch base a little bit about Germany, because in Berlin, we made a lot of stories about Berlin. And it's a movement that has been growing, and it's moving the whole political spectrum in some way. So you've been in contact with a lot of people in Germany, haven't you?
I have, mostly through Twitter. It's pretty amazing. For all of those Twitter haters, it still is a powerful tool to connect people and to connect movements. And the folks in Berlin, I think, have helped to change the global conversation around housing by really challenging the over-commodification, uber-marketization of housing in their precious city. And they are, what I love about them is they aren't afraid to be ambitious in their demands.
And then the most interesting thing, is in Berlin, there will be a special referendum. And a referendum you can call on if you gather enough signatures. And what people are asking for is a referendum about confiscating apartments from companies who have more than 3,000. And basically, it means that 243,000 apartments out of the 1.5 million in Berlin would be then nationalized. It's very radical. It might not happen. But it's coming from like 30, 40 years of deregulations and the state is not doing anything. It's a big shift. It's a big shift. And supporting this referendum, this confiscating of apartments is also the big unions. It's also many of the political parties, including the Green Party. And the Social Democrats are party split, so their youth are in favor of this, but not the big party. So this is something we should look out for, this referendum in Berlin.
Absolutely. I think it's so exciting to see what they've managed to achieve in a short period of time. They got all of these signatures. And the idea, too, is not just, obviously, the nationalization of a huge number of units, but it's to keep those rents low and to keep them at a cost that people can actually afford. That's in relation to their actual household income. And I mean, we've moved so far away from that, where rents everywhere around the world are set based on what a market can bear, what investors are, the prices are being driven up by investors. So the Berliners are really challenging that, and that will help, and I think is already helping other movements in other cities, in other countries. So
the cool thing is that they're actually breaking the logic of the market, because
that's right.
The market has put a lot of money on top of buildings in Berlin, as they do in many other cities. They said, it's good, apartments are good, real estate is good, so let's invest, and then the prices go up and up and up. But then the actual very building can't handle it without pushing up the rents in an extreme way. So it's totally unsustainable. The whole
That's
idea
right.
of investing so much into people's homes. So when this legislation that is now up to a referendum actually says we shouldn't pay, the government shouldn't pay the market price of these houses. It should pay half. All this speculation, that's not our problem. That's your problem. You started to speculate in a basic human need, people's homes. And it has never been okay, because people need, homes are infrastructure. A society needs homes also for people who have ordinary jobs. So I think it's very interesting. Mm-hmm. Canada, it's a country which is has a long border to a country called the United States. And then most of you live very close to that border, and the rest is a lot of land and lakes and beauty and some elks and sea lions. What do you have? Yeah,
bison, moose.
Yeah. So it's a very special country, and nobody knows anything about Canada except some Canadians, and you are one of them. And you have an election now the 20th, and I tell you, it's not something we read a lot about in the Swedish news media, or any other. So tell us, what's cooking in the beautiful country of Canada?
I think internationally, Canada's reputation is a little different than the reality on the ground. I think Canada's seen as sometimes a broker, a big proponent of human rights, a land of milk and honey where, we have universal health care and things are pretty good. In recent years, of course, like so many other places, we have a housing affordability problem, a real crisis. We have a huge homelessness crisis, and of course those things are related. And that's kind of the untold story often about Canada, a lot of poverty. Frederick, you've seen when you've been to Toronto for film festivals, the Hot Docs Film Festival, you've seen the streets of Toronto, and filming Push, the film, you learned a lot about the realities of the housing market.
I've been coming to Toronto for over 15 years, almost every year, and I can totally see the difference. I've never seen so many people in the street, and it's now after COVID, it's obviously even worse, where people are camping in parks, and that leads to clashes with police and so on. It's all the signs of a crisis.
Absolutely. In fact, I was in Toronto very recently, meeting with people who are living in those parks. And what I found fascinating was their clarity, where they're, in their tent, in a park in the city, and they're pointing their fingers up, literally up, at all of the cranes and condominiums in the sky. And they're saying, how is it that I live here in this tent, and there are all of these new luxury units being built around me? They see the connection 100% between their reality and this financialization of housing. I found it was amazing. They were incredibly articulate.
Isn't it good that people are building new homes in Toronto? I mean, that's an obvious question.
Yeah. And a lot of people will say the answer to the problem is supply, build. But of course, the problem is, who are we building for? What's driving that building? And a lot of the building is investor-driven building for investors, for luxury, for high-end. and we're not building for the people who are most in need. But the people who say build, build, build will also say, well, it doesn't really matter if it's being built luxury, high end, because they believe in trickle down economics, where they say if you flood the market with supply, then the prices will eventually come down and everyone will be able to afford housing.
They don't want the prices to go down.
Exactly.
They always want the prices to go up. Their whole business model is based on rising prices. So that's a total lie.
It's a lie. And housing and real estate defies traditional economics. And many economists are saying that now. Banks are starting to talk about it in Canada. They're starting to say, supply-demand economics, traditional macroeconomics doesn't apply in the housing sector. It's all about speculation. And as you said, Frederick, driving prices up. And we've seen there has been new supply. It's not like nothing has been built in Canada in years. And the new supply is not resulting in affordable housing. In fact, as you've noted, it's making things more expensive.
What are the lines? Can you see that the political parties in Canada has moved? Have they understood this in a new way? Or are people still at the same position they were like 5 years ago? Or has something changed?
That is the cool thing. So we had an election 2 years ago. This is an abnormal election because of minority government and because of the pandemic. The government felt that they needed to hear from the people of Canada. And very cool is that housing, the unaffordability of housing and even homelessness has been identified as a major electoral issue, right alongside climate change and Indigenous reconciliation. So those are I would say they're the big three issues in this election, which is pretty amazing because for so long, I have found political parties in Canada kind of resistant to naming housing as a crisis in the country and homelessness as a crisis. So the dial has moved, which is really good.
So that means that a lot of people call you, hey, Miss Farah, what are your point of view of this? And I mean, I guess you are one of the experts in Canada on this issue. So people call you a lot, I guess. Yeah,
I mean, sure. I did, in fact, a roundup of radio interviews across the country last week, just taking a quick and early look at what the political parties are saying in their platforms, those that have come out so far with their platforms. Not all the parties have, but so people are, and some of the candidates are asking me my opinion. What should they run with? And it's interesting.
Good. I like them to listen to you. I think they will learn something. So, but do they also get scared of you? Are you too radical?
I don't know if I'm considered too radical. I think maybe I don't know. No, I don't think they're scared of me because I'm radical. I think some people would probably say I'm not radical enough, because I do think, as anyone who's seen push knows, I think we need to change our system, but I don't think we need to bring down the entire system. I think there are a lot of things that could be done to make the current system work better for people who don't have a lot of money and are also at the same time running our cities and necessary for our cities. So I think the Berliners are doing that too, right? I mean, they're not saying bring down the whole system. They're saying let's tame the system. Let's regulate it. Let's make sure housing remains understood as a human right.
Push has been out in Canada for 2 years now, and you're Canadian, so when we released the film, premiered the film in Canada, we got a lot of press, and because of your presence and your clear voice also in Canada. Can you feel that politicians and journalists have seen Push, and that has in some way also moved the debate?
Yeah, and I mean, I think advocates have also seen Push and academics. And I think there's a nice growing momentum, and I think Push has helped in that, a momentum around being able to name the commodification of housing as a real problem and the financialization of housing as a real problem. There are still some folks who are calling it a red herring problem. So what I think has happened is there's been a lot more talk, a lot more action, and advocacy on the issue of the financialization of housing, and that has finally trickled to the political parties. So I think Push had a lot to do with that. I hope Pushback Talks had something to do with that too. But I also think it's helped arm advocates. When you set out to make Push, one of the things you said to me is, we don't have a language for this. There's no language. And I think Push the Film actually has helped create that language that was missing and a narrative that was missing. So I'm quite excited to see that the political parties have finally recognized not just that there's a housing crisis, but that financialization is part of the crisis. The next question is, have they gotten it right?
Okay, so who are the parties and what are their proposals? What have you? Yeah. Can you sum it up in some way?
Yeah,
for people who don't know anything about Canadian politics. Yeah. We know about the Trudeau because he's good looking, but people say he's good looking. I'm not so sure.
He's got a full head of hair, so that gives him a lot of street cred as a political leader. So we have four main parties in Canada. We have the Liberal Party, which is Prime Minister Trudeau's party, so the party that's in power. And I guess you'd say it's centrist or right of center sometimes and left of center sometimes. You have
they understood the housing question then?
Yes. So the Liberals have released a 16-point platform on housing. I suppose what's most interesting to me is they've said they're going to review the tax laws that have supported the financialization of housing in Canada. So, these are laws that, give preferential tax treatment to the big corporations, the real estate investment trusts, the pension funds, et cetera, that are investing in housing and that are driving up the cost of rentals. And I suppose I like this because it's really going after the structural apparatus that has allowed rents to get so expensive in this country.
But they're quite aware about you, aren't they?
They know me. Sure, they know me. I think that their government, when they were ruling until a week ago, they said they're still studying financialization and hadn't done too much to correct for it. They did try to implement a 1% national tax on vacant properties, but that hadn't come into force yet. I think it was supposed to come in 2022, and it was going to generate about $700 million, which 700 million Canadian dollars is not very much, which suggests that perhaps foreign-owned vacant properties is not such a big issue in this country. Yeah, so it was non-residential vacant properties. $700 million, that's not very much. Anyway, that was the Liberal Party. There is the New Democrat Party, NDP. They are considered left of center.
That's like European Social Democrats, or?
I think so. That's right. Yeah. And in this election, they have come out hitting quite hard on financialization. So they've said they want a 20% tax on the sale of homes to non-Canadian citizens or residents. Are you starting to see a theme here? Non-Canadian citizens or residents. They also said that they will try to, without going into too many details, they'll try to regulate those big developers, investors in housing that engage in renovictions. So that's, where you invest in a property and you say, oh, I've got to make some upgrades to this property, and you do those upgrades and then you evict the tenants. So they've come out with some proposals to stop that from happening. We have the Green Party, and it's not like the Greens in Europe. They're not even connected, as I understand it, which is really unfortunate. I really wish there was more influence. But the Greens haven't come out yet with their platform on housing. They're in some disarray as a political party in this country. They're having a leadership problem.
The Green Party has a tradition of being in disarray. So maybe in that sense, they are like a part of the Green movement.
It could be. And lastly, the last party is the Conservative Party. And they are conservative, and you might say right or neoliberal. But they have been the surprise of the election. So they have come out with a 2-year ban on foreign investment in residential real estate in Canada. A 2-year ban. But again, note the theme, foreign investment. They also have come up with a big, bold, and ambitious, we're going to create 1 million units in Canada. And what's interesting about it, I didn't talk about supply for the other parties, but what's interesting about it is they want to take federal government land, so the national lands and properties, and convert them into residential properties for everyday people in Canada. But they haven't said whether those would be affordable.
But it's interesting in some way, even if it sounds very classical, just to build 1 million homes and so on. I mean, we've had those kind of campaigns in Sweden also, but it sometimes leads to something good. But it's a signal of that all identified that housing is an issue people think about and worry about. So it's something. But what is this focus on the foreigners? Because money is money. We know that. We talk about the criminal money, the laundered money. When it enters into society, it is just money. So if Blackstone, we talked a lot about Blackstone, this big private equity company. If they buy a Canadian company, they will, of course, appear like Canadians in Canada. So that sounds like the Canadian politicians need to also look into the behavior of Canadian companies.
I was so hoping you would say that, Frederick, and I think...
Because you can't. I can.
Yeah. No, I can, but...
Hey, friends out there, Canada. I love Canada, but there's also Canadians that are really, really bad. And you have to go after the really, really bad Canadians, I think, because they are destroying your society. I know there are Swedish companies operating in Canada, Akelius. You know, Akelius, you made a report about Akelius. It has some Swedish flag because the owner is Swedish, but it's registered in Bahamas and Cyprus. So you can see it of some kind of tax reasons. But in Malmö, my town here in Sweden, they own 4,000 apartments, which is quite a lot, so they're big here. Now they announced they're going to sell it all because they're going for new markets. And they mention Canada. So they're coming, they're grabbing more in Canada.
That's
so
right.
Look out for Akelius, they're coming your way. But then there will be foreigners.
We have to remember these guys are really, really smart. And they know how to do business. So first of all, even if it's in quotes, foreign company, I think Blackstone, for example, did that in Sweden, right? It wasn't Blackstone from New York. They created another company that was in fact a Swedish company and did their dealings that way. And so that's what I presume the foreign investors will do. They'll just set up subsidiary companies that are Canadian and do business that way. That's one. Two, as you said, there are plenty of real estate investors and developers that are Canadian that have been completely disrupting our market, 100%.
No, but if you want to understand global capitalism, it's to understand that they have this flag strategy where they basically put their money in one place or many places. They put their headquarters in different places. It's actually hard to say what flag has this country. And when you call Akelius Swedish, then you should put the Bahamian flag on a Cypriotic flag on, or the daughter companies or whatever. And what is Blackstone? Of course, Blackstone has its headquarters on 6th Avenue, New York, 5th Avenue, but still. It's a monster that has many flags and many headquarters and many, So it's if we want to fight this kind of extreme capitalism on steroids, it's not about the flags. It's about the behavior of this money.
Exactly, and I mean, I think there has to be none of the political parties have done the internal work, like what financial machinery is there in Canada that is making real estate an attractive industry for these actors? And we know the answer to that. It's that they get preferential and advantageous tax status and access to cheap loans and therefore cheap money. I mean, money is free, as you always say. Money is free for these guys. So there's no political party that I see so far that's saying they want to change our tax code or our tax act so that these trusts, because it's all done through real estate investment trusts, so that these trusts don't get such advantages. I don't see anyone saying that. I don't see anyone saying that there's going to be some change in interest rates if it's just speculative investment, for example. I don't know enough about monetary policy to know if that's possible. But
I think the mistake is basically that when you talk about housing, is housing politicians, people are into the housing issue. But this really is, it's about the finance market. It's the behavior of the finance market. The finance market has its own way of functioning. It's now its own machine. I mean, in the early days, finance was a way to, like a service sector for real industries, But now it's its own little machine. Their only interest is to grow numbers, to grow money. And they don't really care about what happens with this stuff when they put money into homes or they put money into a gold mine. They don't really care about the content of that company. It's all about moving in, moving out. I mean, Akelius is selling now 4,000 apartments in Malmö. They've been buying a lot, and they've been pushing up the prices. But now they feel, okay, now it's time. They promised their investors, we're going to do all this because you will get this return on capital. Now they'll get it, and then they move on to some place where they can grow money again. What are they leaving behind? They're leaving behind more expensive apartments, a city where the whole rent level has been pushed up without really making the quality of this apartment so much better, a little bit better maybe. But it's like to a very high price. These companies and this finance sector, they don't care about society. They don't want to be a part of building a country or building a city. They don't talk about future or talking about the nature or whatever, because they don't have a soul, they don't have a base. It's just a flood of money that is going in all these directions.
Yeah, I think what you raise is so interesting.
Was I too poetic now?
I loved it. And I think I studied poetry as an undergraduate. So bring on the poetry, Frederick.
It was kind of lousy poetry, though. But
yeah, okay. I'll take any poetry at this stage. I'm in a bunker. There's a pandemic.
Yeah, I know. It's horrible. Yeah.
One of the things you said that really resonates is, and I'm not seeing in this election, I think it's different in, for example, Germany and Berlin, that what we're talking about here is finance, not housing, actually. And we're talking, therefore, about monetary policy and fiscal policy. And in the platforms that I've seen, there isn't a real reckoning going on with monetary and fiscal policy. The Prime Minister himself was asked by a journalist in a scrum, or whatever it's called, are you going to deal with monetary policy in this election? And he brushed it up. He said, absolutely not. We have other things to deal with. This is the last thing we need to deal with. And of course, it's monetary policy that's the Bank of Canada, right? Our national, central bank. They set the interest rates. They can deal with inflation and all the things that affect the little people, right? So if interest rates are low, that is actually bad for renters because it's really good for investors. And similarly, when inflation is high, that's really bad for renters because they have less money, basically, at the end of the day. So I don't see too much reckoning. I don't see too much railing against the 1%. There have been calls by the NDP for, I think, a wealth tax. But the wealth taxes, I don't think, touch housing and investors in housing, because wealth tax tend to be, okay, for the wealthy, people who earn over X amount, or they tend to be for corporations. But real estate flies under the radar of corporations because it's all done through trusts, real estate investment trusts, which aren't considered corporations in the traditional sense. So, yeah, I'm going to go back now and have to look at all the platforms and see if I've missed something. Maybe someone is talking about big economic structural reform.
So, bottom line, you don't know where you're going to. What is your vote this election?
I'm in a tough riding. I'm in a tough riding. All of the candidates, I know 4 of the 5 candidates. Is that 5? I know them, and they're all solid. They all have some good policies. So
a message from us or from me. Hello there, Canadian candidates, politicians. If you want Leilani's vote, you have to step up. You have to speak out. You have to do better. And then stuff can happen. Yeah. Okay, good. Go and sell yourself, pitch yourself, tweet to Leilani. Leilani, we're going to go after the bad guys, and we are with you, Leilani. So I think it might happen. That was my little message to Canada. Leilani, I think we should wrap up because it's, yeah. You know, I have a little secret. I'm actually going to travel tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
To start a new film project. That's
exciting.
It's kind of exciting.
The world awaits.
Me too. I've been blocked for a year.
Yeah.
So
more than a year.
It's almost like, wow, is this my job? We'll see.
Super exciting. Let's see if you remember how to make a film.
I have no idea. But I'm traveling out tomorrow, and I will tell you more later on, Leilani, what's in my head, because it's a lot. It is totally confusing right now. But we'll see. But it's going to be fun to go out again, and together with my amazing friend and cinematographer, Janice Davila. So we'll see.
She's the best.
Yeah. So thank you. Normally we end up this podcast talking about that we don't have any money, and actually got a very nice letter from a listener in the Netherlands who loved the film and loved the podcast, but she was a bit critical to me talking about money. And I can understand that we appear like we are so confident and cool that we of course are very rich ourselves and so on. Unfortunately, it's not true. So we actually have to work for our money and to pay the bills. And this podcast we've been doing now for a year without any incomes at all, and it takes planning time, this recording time, and then we have Mikey Jones here who's doing the whole mix and the editing, which is at least a day's job a week. And we've been doing this without any payment for a year. And we are a small documentary film production company. We don't do any commercials. We don't do any industrials. We only do documentaries. And it's not where people get rich, I tell you. So that's why we have this call in the end of our podcast. Leilani, what is the call?
The call is for more people to support Pushback Talks by becoming a Patreon. And there is the URL at the bottom of our blurbs about the podcast. So wherever you download your podcast, you'll see a link to the Patreon account. And every little bit counts and helps, as you say.
And it can also be a friendly gesture, being
Absolutely.
Like $2 a month or something that you can think, okay, I can afford to give away $2 a month to my friends Leilani, and maybe 50 cents to Frederick. You know, like you can write and how if you want to differentiate it a bit, but anyway, all the money will go to Mikey anyway.
Exactly. That's right.
So, but thank you very much, Leilani, and it's cool to be back. And
It's good to be back.
we need to make some plans for a new season. And if
Season 3.
if any of you listeners out there have any suggestions about what we should talk about and who we should meet, tweet us, send us emails, find ways to reach out, and we will take everything into consideration. So now, hasta la vista, baby, and have a nice continuation of the summer.
Thanks, Frederick, and safe travels. Good luck with your work.
Thank you. Ciao. Bye.
Bye.
Pushback Talks is produced by WG Film. To watch Push, visit pushthefilm.com. You can also support us by becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/pushbacktalks. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.